Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co host, one of your co hosts, Jocelyn Turner. Such a lovely day here in Northeast Florida, and OMG is the world heating up, Dr. Kane. And I think that's what prompted me to say, Dr. Kane, I think we need to talk about high blood pressure because I can only imagine how it is having high blood pressure in this heat. So, today, if you're joining us, we're talking about under pressure, managing blood pressure in the heat of summer. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I am doing hot. Yeah, I'm doing well. At least this week my air conditioning is working. Remember last week it was out,
That's
and so
right. Yeah,
I've had close to about 5 days of good AC. So I do.
fantastic.
This subject was right on time for me in terms of how to manage. How to try to manage high blood pressure or whatever during this hot weather. Not that I got high blood pressure, but I still have to stay tuned in as to managing hydration and yada 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 stuff that we'll talk about, both for people without high blood pressure and people with blood pressure issues.
You know what, Dr. Kane, you've referred to yourself as a seasoned dude in the past. So I'm going to ask you after I bring in our guest. As a seasoned dude, how in the world have you managed not to get high blood pressure? Because so many seasoned dudes like yourself have it. So I'm gonna put that on pause a second while I introduce our regular to the podcast,
I was say I know the
our
co-host.
resident registered dietitian, registered and licensed dietitian,
All
Miss
right.
Linda Lockett Brown. How are you doing this evening, Linda?
I'm doing marvelous, and I don't have high blood pressure either.
What in the world? What in the world? Jeez Louise, what is
Well, you
happening?
like
What
this
is
because we both do
what is
the same
happening?
thing.
I did not get the memo. I did well, I got the memo, but I failed to adhere to it because I like to eat crap. Let's put it out there to our guests. So you're our audience. You're not alone. I am one. I told somebody, Linda and Dr. Kane, years ago, that intellectually I know what to do, but my culture trumps my intellect when I go to the grocery store or when I go to the restaurant. I just always seem to go back. On Sunday, I want me a good old soul food meal. You know what I mean? Linda, I'm struggling. Linda, I mean, come on now, we got to work with me here. But yeah, so that's interesting that the two of you have shared that neither of you have it when so many, not all, but so many of my peers actually have it at this stage of our lives. And some of them actually developed high blood pressure younger. So, Dr. Kane, let's start the discussion. I'm putting you on the spot by simply asking, what is high blood pressure and why is it often referred to as a silent killer?
Okay, so high blood pressure is basically relates to the pressure within your vascular system by which your body operates. Obviously if it's high, then that's called high blood pressure. What we need to do is determine uh, what the uh, what the parameters are to determine high blood pressure, and how do we go about checking high blood pressure. But before I do, last Wednesday I had it was a short day, so I had 14 patients in the office that I was seeing. You know how many of them were high blood pressure? 13.
Wow.
13 of them were high blood pressure. And the ages range from 31 to the oldest is 87. And
31?
31 to 87. That's right.
Wow.
Yep. And so high blood pressure, the way we measure it, if you want to, you go ahead and get a calibrated blood cuff, blood pressure cuff, sorry. Get a calibrated blood pressure cuff and kind of sit it on the floor. You take a seat, be comfortable yourself, and then rest for at least 5 minutes before you take the first reading. Try to take at least 2 readings at least a minute apart. Okay. Now, the determination of normal blood pressure is considered to be less than 120 over 80. Still modifiable depending on the person's comorbidities, which mean other diseases that they may have. But assuming that they have nothing else going on that may influence the definition, the normal blood pressure, like I said, is less than 120 over 80. Elevated blood pressure is 120 to 121 to 129, give or take. And then you can still have that diastolic number less than 80. Stage 1 high blood pressure, hypertension, is considered to be 130 to 139 systolic, and 80 to 89 diastolic. Stage 2, which just obviously means worse blood pressure, is greater than 140 systolic and greater than 90 diastolic. And then hypertensive crisis, meaning that we got a big problem that you probably need to go to the ER, unless you have some center that can handle that acute elevation, is greater than 180 and or greater than 120. So you notice I said and or. So you can have systolic high blood pressure, you can have diastolic high blood pressure, which is systolic being the top number, diastolic being the bottom number. I'm not trying to treat my patients, no disrespect to anybody, but I just kind of try to keep it as simple as I can. And but you can also look at what other comorbidities that are associated with it, and that may modify that definition of high blood pressure for that individual.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I know our audience is sick of me talking about my dad, but you cared. I remember when I brought him to you, Dr. Kane, for the first time, because when I learned, and it's a conversation we need to have with our elderly relatives and just relatives in general, and not be ashamed to talk about it. But my dad was on so many medications, and I remember when I took him when his doctor told him to bring a family member to that visit. And I remember, and I tell this story all the time, so if you've heard it, sorry, you're getting ready to hear it again. But I remember his doctor told him that he was, his blood pressure, he was not managing his blood pressure or his blood sugar well. And at that point, he was on a combination of probably 10 or more drugs, right? And I remember my dad saying so simply, Linda, but I'm taking my medicine every day. And it hit me at that particular moment that when we get a headache, we take a Tylenol and get some rest and it'll go away. And what if everybody thought that, right? That it's as simple as, taking this little pill or these pills in order to manage their blood pressure. But high blood pressure is so much more than that. I remember when, and again, I tell this story when my dad got his cancer diagnosis years later, and thankfully Dr. Kane did get that blood pressure under control. It was too late. He was already at end stage renal disease. But I remember when my dad got his cancer diagnosis, that was very traumatic to me. And my blood pressure just went up and up and up and up, and I couldn't get it under control. And I ended up having to get on blood pressure medicine. But it was at that point that I also said, you're not managing your stress. So I went to a therapist, right? And so I say that to say to our listeners that managing blood pressure is very complex. Dr. Kane talked about the various levels or types of blood pressure. But Linda, I was at the health department at the time, and I remember my old colleague, who's a registered dietitian, said to me, and I was so mad at him, it was a him. He said, once you start on blood pressure medicine, it's probably unlikely, not impossible, but it's probably unlikely that you'll ever get off of it. Oh, that hurt my feelings. And I was like, what? Because I was so accustomed to when I had my knees replaced, I may have been on some pain medicine temporarily till I got past that. But when you have high blood pressure, I mentioned that these scenarios because you have to take it serious, is the point that I'm making. And I mentioned also at the beginning of this episode that my upbringing and culture, my dad was a great cook, cooked some soul food that he could have opened up a restaurant, right? However, I knew intellectually, and I still do, I can't keep blaming daddy for my bad eating habits, right? That this wasn't right. Linda, why do you have a lot of people coming to you who are struggling with managing their blood pressure?
Yeah, and as Dr. Kane was talking, I had a 10-year-old a couple of
Oh,
weeks ago that
say
had
what?
high blood pressure, 10 years old.
That's just
And his
mm,
blood pressure was so, now he also weighed 200 pounds, but his blood pressure
mm,
was so high that the family wanted to put him in sports so he could get some of the weight off. And the pediatrician said, no, it is unsafe for him to be in sports right now with his high blood pressure. And it just broke my heart. I mean, I hated that because getting him, he's also pre-diabetic. Getting him where he needs to be is not going to be easy. It is not going to be easy. And it's interesting you were talking about therapy because one of the things I recommended to his mother was a therapist. So that because what he's incorporating in his mind is that there is something wrong with him. And he's 10 years old. And I don't want him thinking that there is something wrong with him. There's some things we need to do, but there's nothing wrong with him. So and so I wanted his mother to take him to a therapist for two reasons. One was, and it's actually what you said earlier. One was basically for his self-esteem, but the other reason was behavioral, so that the behaviorist can help him learn some new habits. So that's,
mm.
but he's 10 years old.
Well, what we're looking at is what that sounds like. We're looking at some
Wow.
parental enabling is what you see. Is what I sometimes see with that, because there,
Yeah.
the blame is being displaced on this kid when it's actually the parent that needs to take control of his healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
As one of our, uh, uh, I got somebody in agreement with me and said, are the parents living a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah,
And
because
so
you think about the fast food runs. I don't feel like cooking. I'm gonna just stop by a fast. I'm not gonna name a fast food restaurant like Dr. Kane does, but I'm just, fast food restaurant, and I'm not judging parents, Linda, because I get it. People have long days, they're stressed, they're tired. But one thing you always say when you come on here is you have to plan, right? So on your weekend, that's when you plan for the week. Many of us don't want to do that. On the weekend, we want to go find the boots on the ground dance or something, right? But we have to know that you have to plan in order to do it. And by the way, Linda, last week we were talking about dementia, and we talked about, Dr. Kane mentioned when we were reading labels, and you said you don't have to read labels on the things that you should be eating, and that's those fresh fruits and vegetables. So there are some things that really hit home for us. But what surprises, I mean, we talked about, and I shared my own struggle. You talked about that, but what surprises people the most when they first get diagnosed, Dr. Kane, with high blood pressure or hypertension?
all right, so let's quickly make note of some statistics as far as it relates to high blood pressure. About 1 in 4 adults, 1 in 2 adults in in the U.S., especially the African Americans, have high blood pressure. Okay, so about 47% have some level of hypertension. And obviously, that's this Western diet that we're looking at. Okay, I mean that's the biggest culprit. There are some genetic aspects to having it, and so what we have to do, and then most of it is what they call primary or essential hypertension, which is 90-95% of the cases, and that is basically it is the cause is unknown. All right, before we get started. However, it is linked to lifestyle and genetics. So, you can't do nothing about your genes, okay? But you can do something about your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so when that lifestyle, one of which is, couch potato, eating potatoes, and accompaniments especially, as Ms. Brown can tell you.
Couch potato and eating potatoes. Thank you, Dr. Kane. That sums it up right there.
And accompaniments with those potatoes.
And now they want you to eat potatoes fried in beef tallow. Anyway, I just had to throw that in.
Say what? Ew.
And truth be told, African Americans have the highest what we call prevalence, which means persistence of high blood pressure, more or less. And they're more likely to develop high blood pressure earlier in life and with greater severity. Men, believe it or not, tend to have high blood pressure than women at less than 65. And then around that time of menopause, women begin to surpass men in terms of having high blood pressure. But now what we have to also think about is that we tend to die quicker, so our numbers are fewer than the women, because we tend to die much sooner than the women do, be quite frank with you, because we don't take care of ourselves as well as ladies do. They don't go to, you guys go to the doctor, we do not. A lot of us do not go to see a physician, and they have no other means by which they're checking their blood pressures, not to mention or other primary care physicians looking at other comorbidities, which means other diseases that go along with the high blood pressure, like diabetes and smoking and the other habits that we have.
What symptoms do people tend to have, or are there any symptoms, Dr. Kane, to let people know? Okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, when you start having symptoms, you're in trouble. Okay, you're in deep trouble by this time. But most blood pressure, most people with blood pressure don't tend to have any symptoms until late stages. All right, now, I will say late stages. That means they've had it for a significant amount of time. That could be, it's funny when you guys talked about at the age of 10. Not only do you see what you're also seeing at the age of 10 these days, and again, directly as a result of Western diet. And Linda mentioned it, that individual had diabetes. Okay, most of these kids are obese when they're kids and with high blood pressure. Most of them are obese. So you got diabetes, high blood pressure, you got cholesterol issues in young folks. And again, I'm attributing most of this to Western diet. So then when you start looking at socioeconomic factors that play a big role, because sometimes, be quite frank with you, sometimes even though they may want to eat more fresh vegetables and fruits and stuff, affordability may not be there. So the parent may wind up giving them, and sometimes just being in college, we may get these little noodle packets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So so that contributes. And most of these fast foods, believe it or not, they add a lot of salt to their food because they don't taste good without the salt. Salt makes them taste better. Okay, period. As far as they're concerned, the salt makes it taste better. So, and I can call out some companies like Zaxby's or Chick-fil-A, but I won't, that have a lot of salt in their food. And so, we have to, start thinking about high blood pressure for our kids early in life, for ourselves early in life. Maybe not as early as the kids because they're much younger. But, and that, what you also talked about, that good old Southern diet that you talked about, oh man, you're talking about food for fodder. That's high blood pressure, diabetes, and elevated cholesterol. I typically see all three of those in about 60 to 70% of my patients. Even though I got older patients, I tend to see those three in combination quite a bit.
So how does the summer heat contribute to, or does it being so excessively hot contribute to people being able to manage their blood pressures?
Well,
Blood pressure, not pressures, but blood pressure.
right. What you're seeing, one of the big issues with the summer heat is people, with high blood pressure become dehydrated. A lot of times the pressure may drop because the volume, the volume in the blood is lower, but you may get an acute acceleration of your blood pressure because of dehydration, and your body trying to protect that itself from too low of a blood pressure. Okay, sounds a little bit odd, but when your blood pressure starts getting too low, your body will start secreting certain hormones to try to raise that blood pressure. Does it overcompensate? It potentially can in some people. Okay, just opposed to those that can't compensate or don't overcompensate, it may really drop that blood pressure very low. But if you speak it with regards to how sometimes I love to use automobiles as an analogy to the human body in terms of what we do.
Mm.
Your car can throw a rod with too low blood pressure, but also too high blood pressure. So both are dangerous. The issues what we see a lot with blood pressure and the heat, other than what I just described, is people on certain medications taking certain blood pressure medications become even more dehydrated than just the heat by itself, and have no way of recuperating from the hypothermia associated with the heat. And then of course, if that blood pressure starts accelerating, then of course it can lead to other bad consequences such as heart attack, stroke, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I know I talked to people over the years when I've shared with people about, as we have in many of our podcast discussions, and I hope we lost Linda. I hope she's able to come back on, because I do have some questions of her, because I know a large portion of it has to do with what we eat. But there are multiple contributing factors relative to one having high blood pressure, and of course, genetics, which we can't do anything about, right? Lifestyle, as you mentioned, diet, physical activity, alcohol, tobacco, sleep, stress. And then, of course, the social determinants of health, Dr. Kane, a conversation we've had often: neighborhood safety, food access, stress from racism or poverty. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, medication complexity in terms of side effects, access, adherence, and challenges. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about managing blood pressure in the heat of summer. A lot of you may be struggling with managing your blood pressure on a regular basis, and now compounded with the high temperatures, you do need to make sure that you are careful checking your blood pressure on a regular basis. If you don't know how to do it, get yourself a blood pressure monitor. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and I always say either you pay now or pay later, and paying later is ending up in the hospital. So yeah, and then I also tell people, when you want to buy someone a gift, consider gifts to help them manage their health better. And a blood pressure monitor might be one of those things that you share. A good pair of sneakers might be another thing that you buy them in order to get out and walk. And nowadays, if you're taking your pet, make sure you get your pet some shoes, because the asphalt is too hot for pets to walk on. So ask any questions that you have. We want to know what's happening with you. Are you having a hard time managing your blood pressure? Post us a question. Dr. Kane, I know that, between heart disease or cardiovascular disease and cancer, they kind of flip-flop in terms of the one and or second leading cause of death. And when it comes to high blood pressure, if you don't get your blood pressure managed, you could eventually have a heart attack or a stroke, or worse, you might die. So how do you help your patients to realize that this is serious. And although they may have known grandma or uncle or someone who had high blood pressure all their lives, that it is a serious thing that they need to pay attention to.
Well, just a point of reference. Cardiovascular disease by far outweighs cancer in terms of death. But I've talked about cardiovascular disease, which can include high blood pressure, heart disease, yada, yada, yada. The various causes and various comorbidities associated with cardiovascular disease. But by far, it outweighs cancer as the leading cause of death. And various other cancers rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be, depending on the sex of the individuals and so on and so on. But I hate to get that point out. What was the question that you wanted in particular? I couldn't help. I wanted to make sure I got that out. What was the question?
That's all right. Finish your thought, Dr. Kane. I was just asking, why is it so hard for people to manage their blood pressure and to take it seriously?
Well, because they feel no symptoms. That sounds a little bit, oxymoron. Feel no symptoms because there are no symptoms necessary. They don't necessarily have to have any symptoms with the blood pressure being high. That it's working behind the scenes with steady damage to your bodies. When I talk about cardiovascular disease, I'm mentioning stuff like heart disease. Okay, blood pressure has a certain effect on the heart, including increased size of the heart. And eventually maybe because of what you got to remember is the heart is a muscle. Okay, and it's a muscle just like skeletal muscle, meaning. If I take mine and start doing my weightlifting, my biceps get big, that's my muscle, that muscle responding to stress of resistance, resistance against lifting that weight. Well, the heart is a muscle and it will respond to that kind of resistance in the same fashion, except that muscle has 4 chambers to it. And so when the heart starts to enlarge, it will enlarge outward and inward, okay? And in theory, it can also make those chambers within the heart smaller, which means if they're smaller, you're going to pump less volume per stroke, which then means if your body needs a certain amount of blood circulating per minute, it's got to pump faster to reach that same amount of circulation volume. And then so when that happens, now, you just got these fast heartbeats, and it may lead somewhere down the line to heart failure, if not addressed in a proper fashion. May lead to heart failure because the heart just says, look, I'm tired. I'm out. See you later. You on your own. That type stuff. There are other things that, as you know, with high blood pressure can do anything with strokes, kidney disease, as you mentioned with your dad, in terms of him having being put on dialysis. And what people don't tend to understand is that a lot of times the end results of high blood pressure is renal disease or kidney disease. And boy, I tell you, dialysis is nothing to play with. Okay, you really don't want to go down that road if you can help it. You get that you can a lot of times you can look at patients and tell that they're on dialysis. Their skin color tends to change. They real kind of a leathery. Dark, I don't want to say black, leathery discoloration, black leathery discoloration. They tend to get, a lot of times they get kind of skinny because their nutrients and stuff are not well as absorbed as well. And so, it's just some things that you can look at them, and as a seasoned physician, I ain't say old physician, as a seasoned physician, you can look at them sometimes and go like, oh yeah, I already know what's going on with that. And I find it funny because sometimes I'm in the store and I'm looking at patients and okay, there go one that look like they on some dialysis and so on and so on. And I probably shouldn't be. It's not that I'm picking at them. It's just that you, as a physician, you learn observation is key. Okay, you're talking to your patient. You gotta look at them and hear what they got to say. If you ain't paying attention to your patient and all you're doing is sprouting verbiage, then I don't know how much good you're doing. Or you're not doing as much good as you can do if you can have an interaction with them. Interaction includes conversation, observation, and so on and so on. So,
Yeah, so Linda, to that point, we're going to take a minute for our mid-show minute. And I want to come back to you, and I want to start with the question: are there any particular foods that people should focus on that might help lower their blood pressure? Tyrone, take it away for our mid-show minute.
Today is July 1st, 2025, and welcome to Pause for the Truth Mid-Show Minute. As the sun rises over the city, we come together as a community, diverse, strong, and ready to embrace a new day. Whether you're starting your morning with us or taking a moment to pause, we're here to share stories, insights, and tips to help you live your healthiest life. Let's begin this journey together, celebrating every small victory and supporting one another along the way. Hey everyone, let's talk summer. And not just picnics and beach days, but something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: how hot weather impacts blood pressure, especially in African American and minority communities. Now, most folks think of high blood pressure as a winter concern, but when the mercury climbs, your heart has to work overtime. To cool itself, your body pushes more blood to the skin. That means your heartbeat speeds up, pumping harder than usual. And when you're sweating buckets, you lose water fast. Dehydration lowers your blood volume, which might make your blood pressure drop at first. But here's the catch: dehydration stresses your heart, and that can be dangerous, especially if you're on meds like diuretics or beta blockers, which ramp up fluid loss even more. Sure, some folks see lower blood pressure in summer, but for people with hypertension, these rapid shifts mean trouble. Think irregular heartbeats, heart attacks, even strokes. And if you're living somewhere where the heat and humidity are both sky high, the risks go up too. But here's what really keeps me up at night: minority and underprivileged communities pay the highest price. Decades of unfair housing practices, like redlining, have left so many Black and brown neighborhoods with less shade, more pavement, and hotter streets. In fact, neighborhoods with mostly people of color have about a third less tree cover than white neighborhoods. That means higher temperatures outside and inside homes, especially when air conditioning isn't affordable. And get this: only about 3/4 as many people of color have AC compared to white folks. That's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. For those with mobility issues, even getting to cooling centers can be nearly impossible. Layer in higher rates of high blood pressure. About 55% of Black adults live with it. More outdoor jobs, less access to healthy food, and chronic stress from daily discrimination. And you've got a recipe for real health crises when the heat hits. So what can we do? First, let's push for more green spaces in our neighborhoods. More trees mean cooler streets. Second, advocate for affordable AC and accessible cooling centers. Third, check in on loved ones, especially elders or those with chronic conditions, and encourage regular hydration and medication check-ins with a doctor. Most importantly, let's raise our voices for health equity, so everyone, no matter where they live or what they look like, can beat the summer heat and keep their hearts healthy. Stay cool, stay safe, and remember, looking out for each other is the coolest thing we can do. Before you go, don't forget, community is everything. If you found today's episode helpful, remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on YouTube for more tips and real talk every week. Share this video with a friend or family member who needs it, and let's keep the conversation going. See you next week. Until then, stay cool, stay connected, and take care of one another.
Wow, that was great. It really raised some interesting points that may make people uncomfortable, Linda and Dr. Kane, to talk about redlining and heat deserts. And people think, oh, I'm glad the trees are being cut down, but that is leading to areas that are overheating. Linda, before we went to break, I asked you a question, but I want to back up a second and ask, can you explain how nutrition directly affects blood pressure?
So when Dr. Kane was talking about how the heart pumps and what the kidneys are doing, one of the things the kidneys are doing is they are basically capturing certain minerals, and some minerals they put back in the bloodstream, some minerals they release from the bloodstream. And part of that is to keep particularly sodium and potassium balanced. So if sodium and potassium get out of balance, it directly affects blood pressure. So hopefully Tyrone can work his magic and and get the slides up, because I have some slides about the foods that are helpful and the foods that are harmful. But your body is trying to keep balance. So if you are overloading your body with sodium, but not taking in enough potassium to, I'm going to use the word neutralize, it's more complicated than that, but just think about potassium neutralizing sodium. And so when you look at the things that we know increase blood pressure, those are the foods that are high in sodium, but they're also low in potassium, low in calcium, low in magnesium. And so calcium and magnesium have a different kind of role because they actually relax blood vessels. So if you relax your blood vessels, your blood pressure goes down. So one of the number one sources of calcium and magnesium is dairy. And so my clients say, well, I can't drink milk because I'm lactose intolerant. You still have options. Any dairy that is fermented, the lactose levels are going to be lower. So there's Lactaid milk. There's a brand of milk called Fairlife. Fairlife milk is low in lactose. There's yogurt. There's even cheese. So if you eat dairy products, you are increasing your calcium and your magnesium, and that will help drop your blood pressure. So I want to tell a story about when I first started as a consultant in nursing homes. Oh, he worked his magic. When I did that in nursing homes, the thing that is just etched in my mind forever is it used to be called, the nursing home that used to be called Eartha White. On the 4th floor of that nursing home were men in their 30s. And most of them were in the nursing home because they had undiagnosed high blood pressure, and they either had a stroke or a heart attack or both. And when they had the stroke or the heart attack or both, the thing that just kind of blew my mind is when I talked to them, they said, I didn't know anything was wrong because I felt fine. And so their first warning or, that anything was wrong was actually the event that happened to them. So,
oh, Tyrone, can you pause it on this one right here? And Linda, is it going to keep moving? This is a good one.
Can pause it. Hopefully it won't keep moving.
Because when you were talking about sodium, this is a good one because I see so many things that I see folks eating every day.
Exactly. And so this is from the government, and they do a survey like every 5 years and come up with some numbers. And so when they did the survey before the last one, they estimated that the average sodium intake in the United States was 3,393 milligrams a day. So then they broke it down to see where was it coming from. And so look at that big circle in the middle. 21% was coming from sandwiches. So you may say sandwiches is not the bread, it's the meat. So if you're eating lunch meat, as we used to call it when I grew up, if you're eating lunch meat, you're eating bologna, even sliced turkey, sliced ham. If it's not a brand that purposefully decreases the sodium, even if it's sliced turkey, it's going to be high sodium. So sandwiches. And then the next biggest one is rice, pasta, and other like frozen dinners, those kinds of things. So that's another big area. Then there were vegetables, and we can control the sodium in vegetables unless you're doing canned vegetables. And if you look at this and you add them all together, That's where the problem comes from. So you're looking at the total diet that people are eating. You know, I was listening to our senators last night, and they were talking about how many people will no longer qualify for SNAP benefits. That is concerning. That is concerning. We understand that people
Mhm.
don't always make the best choices when they use their SNAP benefits, but with some education, at least they would have the resources to get better food.
Yeah, we had a Head Start representative on a couple of months ago, and that's what she talked about, all the education that they do for young people,
Right.
planting those seeds, no pun intended, but it getting that early start in education, teaching them the fundamentals so that as they age, they will have received that at a young age, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll just be compounded and they will progress. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about managing your blood pressure in this summer heat. Go ahead, Linda. Looks like you have some great slides to share with us.
But before you get started, well, you're going to go back to the slide that talked about the amount of sodium we bring in each day, should be bringing in each day, and so on and so on.
Yeah. That'll be it. Tyrone, if you can go backwards. Um, see if you look, go back again. If you look at governmental recommendations, um, they they'll say it's okay to have 2,300 milligrams of sodium in a day. For the populations that we deal with, that is too much. So
Right.
the number for people that look like us is actually 1,500. It is 1,500. So that is half of what the government is saying that people are eating right now. So what we can do safely, and you need some sodium. I mean, if you totally eliminate your sodium, you're going to have a different problem. But Tyrone, if you can stop right here. Um, this is old data, so I didn't see an updated one. But it said if you cut the average daily sodium intake down to 1,200 milligrams, the 2,300 is what the government says is safe. But if you dropped it to 1,200, it would prevent 99,000 heart attacks and 66,000 strokes and save 92,000 lives a year. And that's just in the United States.
And one
So,
of the reasons, go ahead.
well, and so when you think about what you were saying earlier, that men tend not to go to the doctor. A lot of folks are they're walking time bombs, and they don't even know it.
One of the first things when I talk to these guys, particularly younger guys, or the guys that really don't want to take on any responsibility, the first thing they want to say is, Dr. Kane, you got to die from something. And so one of the first things, my response to them is, yeah, but you might just not die. And that references what you said at that nursing home. Okay. That means you may be tied up in a nursing home in somebody's bed. They're going to wipe your butt, tell you when to eat, tell you when you can get up, because you can't get up and walk. They got to help you get up. I mean, just think about the debilitation that can occur if you have a stroke and you're 30, 40, 50, even 60. I don't even want to see it at 70 and 80 if I can help it. You know what I mean? Because it's not, sometimes it ain't just about being alive, it's about the quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And quality of life in somebody who has a stroke and or have on dialysis is very much diminished, because when you're on that dialysis as a result of high blood pressure damaging your liver, kidneys so bad, then, about 3 days out the week, you got to go in and get dialysis. You have to go in and spend about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in dialysis. Okay, that's 12 hours a week. In the meanwhile, you're sitting in there with a whole bunch of people. Sometimes they have little community efforts and stuff, but I'd rather have my community on the outside, of the prison of dialysis. Okay,
Yeah.
than inside that prison. And not to mention, they got to make sure they take the right amount of fluid off. You still have to time the medications just right, because dialysis may remove all the medications from your body, and now you got to go back and put it back in. Okay, so it's a whole lot of things associated with that. And all of that can be prevented by knowing your numbers, as we say a lot of times on this program, knowing your numbers and following up with your physician, okay, whomever it may be, following with your physicians to address any issues that you may have with your blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, yada, yada. Those main three: blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol.
So, Linda, what is the DASH diet and why is it recommended for people with hypertension?
So what the DASH diet does, and I have a slide about that at the end, the DASH diet helps you select foods that are low in sodium, high in potassium, high in calcium, and high in magnesium. So if you follow the pattern, that's what you will be doing. And so it is mind-boggling. When the DASH diet first came out, they took people that were hypertensive and their blood pressure numbers, top number and bottom number, dropped from 10 to 20 points just following the diet.
Wow.
And that was just mind-boggling. But it hasn't taken off as well as I thought it would. So what they've done in the dietary guidelines, they talk about the plate method, but then you can click on the DASH diet and it's saying this is a good pattern to follow. It's a good pattern to follow. And actually, if you look at the Mediterranean and look at the DASH diet, they are not that different.
Nope.
They are not that different.
Yeah, Linda, thank you. You had some, oh, here it is.
Stop right there.
But yeah, but I want to go back to some other slides, and this is good right here, because when we talk about the DASH diet or DASH eating plan, the few slides ahead of before these were all so good. All the good foods that we tend to eat. It's so sad that we tend to gravitate towards the foods that they've had to manipulate and make them look like something or look appealing. But those slides where it had the nuts and seeds and legumes and the lean meats and poultry and fish and the fruits and vegetables and whole grains, they look absolutely amazing. But it's sad that those are not the ones that we tend to gravitate towards. And I'm glad you put this up here, because when you talk about servings a day, I remember I used to tell people how many servings of fruits and vegetables you should eat a day. And they were like, all of that, right? But we're not talking about a huge, gigantic bowl. We're talking about a serving. And so people really need to understand what a serving size is to make sure that they are getting the recommended daily allowance of the different food groups each day. So I don't know if you want to go back to some of those great slides of all the disgusting foods that so many of us eat on the regular. And when we talk about the foods that we should avoid, I know you have a lot about the foods that we should eat, but on this particular slide, do you want to talk about this before we go back, Linda, or do you want to go back and we talk about the foods you should avoid?
I don't think she heard you. What I will say till Linda get back in, I do one thing I do want to make sure. That was a great slide that had all those great looking fruits that we saw. Kick to the curb the grapefruit. Okay, do not use grapefruits. I'm not saying grapefruits are not healthy for you or don't taste good, but they interact. The chemicals in the grapefruits interact with so many drugs and medications till I don't even try to waste my time to try to decipher what medications you can take when you eat grapefruits or what medications what medications that you should not eat grapefruit with. It's just better don't do the grapefruit, okay? Because there's too much drug interaction with it.
Yeah, all these foods look so delicious, Dr. Kane. It's sad that they're not the ones that we tend to go for. And I haven't had any dairy today, Linda, so I have to make sure I have some.
Well, look at you don't see the marketing for these foods. You don't see the billboards with these great looking foods up there. Your billboard got these McDonald's fries that look so crisp and golden, and with the cheeseburger that's sitting up there that looks so inviting. You don't see no ham hocks or nothing, but still, they probably more dangerous than the ham hocks, and so on and so on. But that's marketing. That's the Western diet. That is the Western way, where we're trying to really just entice people into buying our products. They don't give a damn about what your health means, what it means to your health. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Big Pharma is behind a whole lot of those entities that we talk about, because the higher your blood pressure, the higher your cholesterol, the higher your diabetes being uncontrolled, guess what? The more medications you wind up having to buy, okay, and so on and so on. And you may not need to buy these medications if you just do what Linda is saying and what most of us physicians are saying, is that is really watch your sodium. You asked me earlier in the program, you say, well, Dr. Kane, how do you manage to stay away from high blood pressure? When I got to pharmacy school,
Dr. Kane, put a pause on it before Tyrone continues to go back. Linda, just kind of say stop when you're ready for Tyrone to stop rolling with the slides.
But we just wanted to, the truth be told, I just wanted to say, because I've done that way back then, okay, it become a habit that now when I eat certain food, it's just too salty for me. I can't tolerate the salt in it. And my wife, bless her soul, she grew up at the old school and tend to want to say the grits won't boil correctly if I don't put some salt in it. Really? It's like, no, don't put that salt in my grits. I add my own salt, and so on and so on. So I much rather patience. I mean, look at that's what they put up. What you're seeing right now is what you see on billboard, because that's what people are selling. They're not selling healthy fruits. They're selling this garbage, and so on and so on. But I digress. Well, Linda's not here right now, so going ahead. I want to ask
Linda,
you,
I'm not sure if you're off camera. I don't know if you can hear us. I know you've been having some technology issues, but if you can speak, even though we don't see you on camera, just to look at these slides. I mean, where does sodium in food come from? We talked about that, and on this particular slide, Dr. Kane, I thought about in growing up, and even when parents who still pack their children's lunches, they tend to start with a sandwich.
right,
and then add everything else to it, not realizing that the type of sandwich that you make, the quantity of it as well, really is leading up to a bad habit in young people moving forward with their diets. And you think about how people will typically, but even when you order lunch for a meeting, it typically consists of a sandwich, a cookie, and a bag of chips.
right.
Right? Unless you specify that instead of the cookie, you want fruit in your box lunches or what have you.
Or take the chips out. Take the chips
out. Right. Yeah.
If you look at this right here, when Linda's ready, but when you look at this right here, this is totally different than the kind of food that we ate growing up. Okay, a lot of our when I started talking about the high salt food back then, our more salty food that we experienced was what we put salt in, or smoked meats, yada yada yada, that kind of stuff. So I think Linda checked in on another. There we go. She's back. Can you hear us, Linda, now?
I can. I switch computers and I hear you.
Okay, all right. So
But we want you to get through these slides, Linda. You put together some good slides. We were just kind of talking about this one until you got back on. So do you want to
Okay,
move
okay.
past this one and go to the next one?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
So this is the limit that's okay, 1,500 milligrams, not per meal, but per day. You can go ahead to the next one. So I have clients ask me, well, what about that Himalayan salt? And so I put, here is the comparison. So regular table salt, a teaspoon. So just think about that. A teaspoon of salt is what the government says that you can have in a day. What I'm saying is too much. But if you do kosher salt, it's 1,900. Fine kosher salt, it's 1,100. Still a lot. Sea salt, 2,100. So there's really no difference between table salt, sea salt, and kosher salt. There's really no difference. Then we get to that expensive Himalayan salt. It's 2,200 milligrams. And then there's a salt that you probably never even heard of. It's from Asia, black salt. It's 2,200 milligrams. So it doesn't matter. It is all a source of sodium. So next slide. So here are the high sodium foods. And so if you look at just this picture, this is what a lot of people eat 1 to 2 times a day. Some people eat this even 3 times a day. And I want to talk about pork because I have so many people who say proudly to me, I don't eat pork. Okay. Isn't pork bad for you? Okay. Well, fresh pork is just fine as long as it's lean. The issue is anything that's smoked, even if it's smoked turkey, you smoke it by injecting it with a salt solution and that has nitrates in it. So the salt solution raises the sodium content and the nitrites increase your risk of cancer. So what are we talking about? We're talking about ham, bacon, ham hocks, fatback. And so other high sources of sodium, fast food, any of it, restaurant food, any of it. That's just the way chefs are taught to cook. Next slide.
fat make food taste good. So does salt.
And I love myself some bacon. Mm.
So there's your bacon. So in bacon, 3 slices of bacon, just 3 slices, 555 milligrams of sodium. So you're 1/3 of your way to what I'm saying is an acceptable limit. So if you, on occasion, want to blow 1/3 of your sodium intake on 3 slices of bacon, go for it. Just don't do it every day. Ham
Don't put it
hock.
on the hamburger.
That's right. 780. Cubed ham, 850. And see, people go, oh, I don't eat pork. I eat smoked turkey. Okay, that's 900. Lunch meat, 2 slices of lunch meat, and it's any kind of lunch meat, unless it's specifically low sodium, 420 milligrams. So you can see why in that earlier slide that sandwiches were 19% of the sodium intake. And then there's ramen. I read a study this week that says that renal failure, 5th stage, where you have to go on dialysis, is increasing in Taiwan. And so you think about Taiwanese folks, they're little, they're not obese, but these folks are young, they're in their 20s and early 30s. And the doctors are saying it's directly related to food intake, stress, and inadequate sleep. So fast
Wow.
food burger, 1,200 milligrams. So you're almost at your limit with one burger. And that's a burger without the bacon on it. So you put the bacon on it, you're already over. And then, of course, canned vegetables, you're at about 300 per serving. So next slide.
Hmm.
So when we talk about restaurant food, and I'm not saying don't eat in restaurants, I'm saying don't eat in restaurants every day of the week. But if you look at the one that has the highest is actually Asian cuisine, which we already knew because of the soy sauce. Soy
Liquid
sauce is
salt. Liquid
in
salt.
sodium. But close behind is chicken, and then American food, steak and seafood. That's a lot. But look at the children's menu. The children's menu is also high. It's too high. So next slide.
Hmm.
I know so many people that say to me, well, I cook dinner for my family every day. Okay. But their view of cooking dinner is Jiffy Mix, Grand's biscuits. I guess I shouldn't say brand names, but it is what it is. And then they'll get Hamburger Helper and throw some the inexpensive ground beef in there. So now it's high fat. And then if they're really good, they'll grab a can of green beans. And that's dinner. So it is dinner, but it's contributing to what we're talking about today. One of the programs that I used to run in South Florida that got eliminated by governmental budget cuts, we actually went into homes of people that got, back then they called it food stamps. We would actually go to their home and teach them how to make their own Bisquick and put it with that commodity flour and put it in a jar, put a lid on it. We taught them how to make the equivalent of Jiffy Mix with commodity flour and some cornmeal. We actually taught them how to do it. So by them doing it themselves, it was saving money, but they could also reduce the amount of sodium that was in it. So next slide. So the bottom line is, as you increase foods that you eat with potassium, calcium, and magnesium, blood pressure goes down. So Jocelyn, you were asking earlier, well, how come y'all don't have high blood pressure? It's actually because I eat this way. My husband, to his dismay, eats this way because he has no choice, because it's what I feed
Are you
him.
going to tell me what foods contain high amount of potassium, calcium, and magnesium?
That's on the next slide. So that's what the next slides do, tell you which foods. So for potassium, it's dark green leafy vegetables. And it almost doesn't matter which one. So whichever one turns you on, eat it. Next slide. Then we have citrus fruit. So citrus fruit, high in potassium. Doesn't matter which one. Another thing that helps with this is you can take lemon juice and lime juice and squeeze it on vegetables, and don't use any salt at all. And it'll taste like you put salt on it. But what you added was potassium. The next slide.
Fresh, or could it be the ones in the jar?
Either one. Either one. So then we have berries. So, and I put the carb count on here because people that are trying to control their blood sugar, they get fearful about eating fruit. So 3/4 of a serving of any one of these berries is actually only 1 carb. So as long as you don't drown it with sugar, it's high fiber, high potassium. Next slide. Tomatoes. So raw tomatoes and cooked tomatoes. So raw tomatoes help decrease blood pressure because of the potassium content. Cooked tomatoes help decrease the risk of prostate cancer and macular degeneration and heart disease. So tomatoes. And for folks that have a tight budget, it would be worth the investment of $1.29 to buy a package of organic seeds from Walmart, and you can grow your own tomatoes in a flower pot. We have 3 in our backyard right now, and they're doing nice, doing quite well. Next slide. So then foods that are high in magnesium, it's your dairy products. And we talked about this earlier. So dairy is going to be high in magnesium and high in calcium. Both of those reduce blood pressure. So if you think about yogurt and you want a dessert, think about a yogurt dessert where you just take some plain yogurt and put those berries in there and have that for a snack or have it as a dessert. Next slide. So we were talking about whole grains earlier. So whole grains are the brown ones. And yes, they do take longer to cook, but the flavor is full and it's nutty. So if you think about it that way. So examples would be barley, brown rice, farro, oats, quinoa, and wheat. So I guess they changed the name. Uncle Ben's is not Uncle Ben's anymore. It's just Ben's. But Ben's has a pouch of brown rice that's already cooked, and it has 0 sodium in it. So brown rice does take a long time to cook, and you have to develop some skill. Where you can buy some Ben's rice already cooked in the pouch and just eat 1/3 of a cup for a serving, not a 1/2 a cup like the container says. But whole grains have magnesium. Next slide. And then there's nuts. If you can eat nuts, if you like nuts, these nuts are not the ones in the can that have been fried and then rolled in salt. These nuts are the ones that you get from the produce section, and they're in a bag. So most of my clients will say to me, well, nuts will make you fat. Well, what you do is you eat a portion. So a portion is 8 almonds, 28 peanuts, and that is a serving. It is not the entire container. And so so we go back to planning. So if you know you're going to eat some nuts, then you're going to, instead of having 3 ounces of meat with your lunch or your dinner, you have 2 ounces of meat, and these 8 almonds or 28 peanuts will be the other ounce of meat. So you've still controlled your calories. So next slide. And so then there's legumes. And so we're talking about beans. So black-eyed peas, black beans, pinto beans, lima beans, lentils. There's some lentils on here. If you need to save money on your budget, here's where you save it. You eat the beans instead of eating meat. So if you have beans and some brown rice, or even beans and cornbread that you made from scratch, that is a complete protein, and it's a lot cheaper than meat, and you'll be getting magnesium and fiber. Next slide.
My mom loves beans and rice and cornbread. Oh my goodness. Guess
Yeah.
I have to start adding that to my meal.
So again, we got the dark green leafy vegetables. These are high in magnesium as well. And so when I grew up, they had this thing where you cook the vegetables in a pot, and they put way too much water, but they call that water in their pot liquor. Well, if you don't put a lot of salt in the pot and you drink that liquid, you are getting a whole lot of calcium and magnesium. So eating the vegetable, you get it, but drinking the liquid from it. And when I do that, my husband just looks at me like, I'm not doing that. But I actually do that. And we're probably near the end of the slides. And so again, the dairy is here because it is a source of magnesium. So that may be the last slide or close to it. And so here's the DASH eating plan. And if you look at the DASH eating plan, it incorporates everything we just looked at. And then there's one slide after this, because my clients will say to me, well, I want my food seasoned. Now, when I think seasoning, I think herbs and spices. When they say seasoning, they're talking about salt. So what I recommend is, if, of course, you don't want your food to taste like the box, when you can, buy a different kind of Mrs. Dash every time you go to the grocery store. If you can do that, just get a little one and start using that on your food instead of salt. Mrs. Dash has no sodium in it at all. But if you're not skilled with using herbs and spices, you can kind of cheat with Mrs. Dash, and it'll tell you what to use on barbecue, what to use on tacos. They even have a marinade. So you can make tough cuts of meat more tender, because the leaner cuts of meat from a fat content tend to be tougher. So you want to marinate them in Mrs. Dash. So
yeah, one of
those
our former
slides.
guests, thank you, Linda. One of our former guests, Chef Amadeus, talked to us about his salt-free spices. So that's another option. And if you're here in Northeast Florida, he's local, so check him out. Thank you, Linda. As usual, that was.
Before you go on, just real quick.
I was leading to a question, Dr. King.
I'm going to tell you about the DASH diet. June 2025, John Hopkins came out with a study just last month, okay, that says that by eating the DASH diet, it lowered with the DASH diet for diabetes, lower sodium content can produce clinically meaningful reduction in blood pressure for people with type 2 diabetes. I just want to throw that in while we were talking about the DASH diet. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit before we end the podcast about hydration. How does the summer heat affect hydration and blood pressure? And what hydration tips do you give folks, especially those taking diuretics or blood pressure medications? And that's for either of you.
I just tell folks, be really, really careful and take one of those big containers with that straw and fill it up with water. And then people say, I don't like the way it tastes. And I'll say, throw some blueberries in there, throw some but there you go. Throw some blackberries in there to give it a little flavor. And you can set your watch to alarm to remind you to drink.
It's sad that we have to do that to remind ourselves to drink water. And mine tells me Get started. You've got it. Keep chugging. Never give up. Almost there. You did it. Refill. So I got one of these, and I chose the kind, Dr. Kane, that doesn't have the release of plastic, since we've talked about,
Right.
the plastic containers. So, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to this conversation. We've gone past our hour, and we really appreciate, Linda, your patience, and sorry you were having some technology issues, but of course, we're going to bring you back. So get ready for my text. Hey, Linda, you want to come back on? But anyway, thank you so much. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and really, and by the way, Linda she has her own practice. She's a registered dietitian. Your health insurance plan may pay for her services, but if not, she won't rob you. She is affordable, but I tell people that you either pay for Linda to help you manage your meal plans, or you pay for the medications from the retail pharmacist. So it's your choice. Linda, we do like to, as you know, give our guests an opportunity to share their final thoughts. Is there anything that you wanted to say and we didn't get to before we end tonight's discussion as we talk about managing blood pressure, especially in the summer heat? We didn't talk about popsicles and ice creams and all the other yummy stuff that's typically out this time of year, but any final thoughts for our audience?
I want to just make a comment about something you said at the outset, that someone told you that if you get on blood pressure medicine, you can never get off. I have clients that have gotten off, but those are the clients that lost 10 to 15% of their body weight, and they followed the meal plan. So, and for those that didn't get off their medication, the dosage, their physician was able to lower the dose. So I consider both of those quite a victory. And I just want to say we're having a diabetes self-management education class here in my office in Orange Park on the 11th of this month. So if anybody is interested, I put the phone number in the chat. You can just call the number. I actually have staff now that can answer the phone. So you can call and register for the class.
Awesome. That's awesome. And by the way, Linda, I'm one of those people who my medication was reduced because I also lost weight and exercised regularly and watch what I was eating, but I fell off the wagon, but that's another story. But I'm back on the wagon, and I've also managed to keep it under control. Never got out of control since the initial diagnosis of my father. Of course, when my father passed, that also I was still out of control. But I always tell people, we have guests on here from various expertise, and in addition to registered dietitian, physician, a therapist, and a physical and a personal trainer, as far as your fitness is a part of your team to help you manage your numbers. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
Quick and dirty. One of the first things you want to do is lifestyle management. Okay, change in lifestyle. You got high blood pressure. Second would be the DASH diet. We talked about it. We talked about how much sodium to limit to. Definitely limit alcohol. Less than 2 drinks a day for men and 1 for women. Weight loss. About every 10 pounds might give you 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury drop. 5 to 10 pounds of weight loss might give you 5 to 10 millimeters, and some people just say points, drop in your blood pressure. Stress reduction, you guys mentioned already. If you're on diuretics, I won't name specific type of diuretic. If you're on diuretics, you have to be extra careful during days where it's hot and so on and so on. Last thing is, that's old school thought process that once on blood pressure medicine, always on blood pressure medicine. That thought has been long dismissed among good doctors that manage your blood pressure well, okay, and with your assistance in managing your blood pressure well, because it takes 2 to tango for this one. There is no such thing as my doctor told me to do this, and and it works because I don't do it. So with that, I want to thank everybody for listening, and Linda, I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us. Obviously, it's never enough time, and we apologize to the audience for staying so long, but because of the technical difficulties that we were having, we will get back to the usual hour and 5 minutes time that we on air.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Dr. Kane. We learned a lot tonight. We unpacked a lot. Again, just make sure that you are staying diligent and know that there is hope. And I always share my personal struggles with hopes that some of you may learn from it. And I have had some ups and downs, but mostly more ups than downs. But we are going to share some handouts, some tips for you. Look at our website, pauseforthetruth.com, where you'll find Linda's contact information that's on the screen now, some information about the DASH diet. Linda put on there the dietaryguidelines.gov. Also, make sure you stay hydrated. Drink water consistently throughout the day. Aim for 8 to 10 cups. Avoid sugary, caffeinated, and alcoholic beverages, as Dr. Kane and Linda said. Eat water-rich foods like cucumbers, watermelon, orange, berries. Carry a reusable water. I've been sipping on mine as a reminder to drink. Monitor for signs of dehydration. And also make sure that you're keeping track of your blood pressure. There are a few apps that you can put on your phone, and we're going to make those available as well. Some of them are Heartify, Cardio, Omron Connect, Smart BP, Welltori, and My Therapy. They range in from free to pricey, depending upon which one you get. You've learned something. If you learned something new today, of course, we want you to share the episode with a friend or family member. Encourage everyone to get their blood pressure checked this week. Everybody you know, don't take it for granted. One of my, someone I know, I'm not going to reveal who they are. They had a stroke a heart attack a few weeks ago. And when I told them what we were talking about tonight, they said she said the symptoms were not what you normally think. She didn't have sharp pains that were, like grabbing her, whatever, but she did have a heart attack. So make sure that you are keeping up with your blood pressure and download the resources that we talked about tonight. Go to the websites. We're accustomed to going to website for concert tickets, movie, games, sports thing, whatever. So make sure that you take advantage of these resources. Google blood pressure monitoring and management apps. Look on our website. We're going to put that information on there. We're going to put information about the DASH diet. Invest in a blood pressure monitor. And of course, we want you to make sure that you are subscribing to our YouTube channel. We have some good information, some experts that have shared so much good information. And of course, continue to tune in for Pause for the Truth. And don't eat too much barbecue ribs and chicken, those smoked meats that Linda talked about. She already warned 4th of July is in a couple of days. Make sure that you are adding dark green leafy vegetables and some of the other products that Linda talked about. Dr. Kane, you bursting at the seam to say something. You're on mute, Dr. Kane. We can't hear you. There you go.
Okay. One thing real quick. Florida law just kicked in, I think, today, in which these high schoolers have to have EKGs before they can go out and compete athletically. So, and one of those reasons is because irregular heart issues, but also because of high blood pressure. So I just want to make sure parents are aware of that.
Thank you. Have a good evening. See you next time on Pause for the Truth.
Good night.
We appreciate you spending time with us on Pause for the Truth. Ms. Jocelyn Turner and Dr. Rogers Kane are grateful for your support. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, catch us live on Twitch, and most importantly, subscribe on YouTube. A big shout out to Tyrone Jackson at Call Tyrone IT Services for keeping us connected. Join us every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more enlightening discussions. Thanks, and see you next week.